think we're live. Good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we are delighted to have Kate Khavari with us today to talk about her brand new book, the fourth in the series, A Botanist's Guide to Rituals and Revenge. And we're expecting our signed copies of it very shortly. So if you'd like one, go ahead and I'll put a link in the comments field if you'd like to order a copy. And if you have questions for Kate, just go ahead and type them in, and Barbara will summon me towards the end of the hour, and I would be happy to ask any of your questions. So, Barbara, over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We got slightly distracted because I am wearing my Jim Thompson t-shirt that I bought in Bangkok, so I had to look up Jim Thompson and try to remember who he was. He was an OSS officer that disappeared in 1967 in the Cameron Highlands and has never been found. Nobody's ever figured out what happened to him. Maybe he got eaten by a tiger, but I'm sure there was a movie with Rita Hayworth. And so any of you watching this who remember what the movie is, because of the connection to botany and silk and how which connects to Kate. Feel free to tell Patrick and maybe he can remind us. Anyway, Kate, book four. Now I have to ask you because I have totally forgotten. Do we pronounce Saffron's name Everleigh or Everleigh?
Everleigh.
It is
Saffron
Everleigh.
Everleigh.
Okay. So Saffron, whom we have been through with three books, all of which I have loved, set in the 1920s. Well, tell us about her first before we talk about this. She's a really fascinating character. What inspired you to write her?
Well, I am a huge fan of like the classic English murder mystery. Like if if there's a man with a little mustache in it, like I love it. So I grew up loving those kind of books, and so when I got the idea to write my own, I really wanted something set in that similar time period, 1920s, like English murder mystery kind of thing. But I wanted a lady sleuth, and I love plants and I love botany. So I decided to make her a botanist, which ends up being really convenient for someone solving murder mysteries because she uses her science knowledge quite often. And being a woman in the 1920s, in the realm of academia has a lot of challenges, but she is quite plucky, tenacious, gets into a lot of trouble. She's kind of like a cat, with her curiosity. It hasn't yet killed her, but in this one, we come close yet again. So, love who she is in history, and I love who she is as a person to read about now. Women in sciences are always people I think worthy of attention. So,
Well, I think she's a fascinating character. Kate's having a little internet trouble, so she freezes up on you. We'll just keep going and she'll reappear. It's okay. Um, if you look back, so much of what we talk about in Victorian times and even early in the 20th century in terms of murder is poison, which is, often women were designated as poisoners rather than it's harder for them, lacking physical strength. They were wearing so many clothes they couldn't actually get close to people. You know, I don't know
well,
if you
and a lot of time they were in charge of food preparation, and so if your man's giving you a hard time, just sprinkle something in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, so, having her an expert on poisoning, and I will say, I don't want to do a spoiler, but when you through, and you should never read the afterword until you've read the whole book, there's a particularly interesting poison in this book related to Bosnia. So,
Mhm.
what's going on in the book had real significance. And what has it only been fairly recently that anybody figured out what it actually was?
I think I want to say it was like in the 2000s. So it's in the last 20-25 years, maybe even less than that, that they identified this particular toxin.
Right. So, chasing it back then, there was no real chance that anybody could figure out what it came from. And so, in a way, we have sort of a early version of biological warfare going on here, but it's based in real science. And that's one of the reasons I like Kate's books is I love learning things, and I can always rely on her um, to really, teach us things about poisons and other things that we might have missed. But now, finally, after we've been through academia, we've been through, all sorts of things. with Saffron, she has always, she, I don't want to say ran away from, but she departed her family home where her aspiration to study and make an impact in academia was completely disliked by her father. Her mother was more sympathetic, but her father was not. So it's always been kind of there that she might want to go back to Everleigh Manor, and there might be some reconciliation, or there might be something going on at Everleigh that would draw her back. This is that book, and it's a Gothic because we are in Everleigh Manor. You must have had fun with that.
I had so much fun with it. I'm not like a huge reader of like horror books or like gothic books in general, but I love the intense like visuals that they give. So I tried to really like go in and evoke those, lots of mist. It's a great counterpoint to summer. So if you're someone who likes to read something cold when it's hot outside, this is a great book for you. So we have like cold and snow and fog. We have ghostly, figures appearing in the mist and disappearing. There is one scene with one of our leading ladies where she's like kind of in her underclothes looking out a window with a candle in her hand. And I really wanted to like bring that imagery, that really classic imagery in, even though it's like a 1920s book. But yes, so we get instead of London dark academia, this time we're going very classic English manner, not quite a castle, but historical home. And it's a little darker, maybe visually, kind of aesthetically than the other books. And I'm not sure if I've frozen again.
You've
Maybe.
kind of frozen. Your mouth is, I
Okay.
mean, we can understand you even if the image is not quite there. But,
Okay, sorry.
Zoom is vulnerable to internet, so don't worry about it.
I
As long as we
know.
can hear you, or I'll just keep talking. I do think that, a Gothic really requires a terrific house. It needs to be generally large. It needs to be, well, maybe it doesn't have to be huge, but it has to be sort of big enough that the house can present a puzzle within itself, and people can be isolated within the house, which isn't going to happen in a two-room apartment. Generally, it's in the country or in some way, doesn't have immediate neighbors, oftentimes has a long, kind of um, a history where perhaps spooky things might have happened. I mean, Manderley in Rebecca is kind of a classic of that, but Horace Walpole wrote The Castle of Otranto. I mean, the Gothic has a centuries long tradition. And I think, I agree with you. I think it's huge fun to write. I'm thinking about all the authors who've tried one. Alice Feeney wrote one not too long ago. Riley Sager has written one. You can create one in so many different places. I was mentioning Jim Thompson. Maybe we could actually, write a Gothic set in the Jim Thompson House and Museum in the middle of Bangkok if you really wanted to. Um, it's no longer
Yeah.
selling tickets, so I'm not too
I
sure what.
love the idea of taking a setting, any setting, whether it's a big scary house or anything, and finding what is scary about it. So like for me, I was imagining this house and the scary places that we visit in this book are places where memory is really heavy for Saffron. She's returning home. Her father has died, who she is like pursuing her career of. Um, like in honor of him. So she's coming back and she has questions about who he was and what he was doing. And so it's not necessarily that the places are so scary, but the memories and the uncertainty is scary. And like what it represents. That and she does go into an ice cellar with which was very scary. Like I think anyone would find it frightening. But there's this old greenhouse that she has to poke around in, and um, yeah, it's intense.
Well, it absolutely is. And it was always going to be traumatic for her to go back to her family home. But she's achieved some distance from it now that she's been living in London, now that she has been, established in her career. She has I hate this term, but it's so popular, her own agency. So,
Mhm.
it's different for her to go back than when she was the daughter of the house and didn't have any real, resources or um
And I think it helps that she's like solved mysteries and like, stuck up against like murderers by now. I think had this happened a couple years ago, it would have gone very differently, but she's really grown her backbone,
yeah.
thanks to these murders that she keeps getting involved in.
Well, that's absolutely true. She also is going back with Alexander. So Mr. Ashton has been a player in this. And, we didn't know for a while whether there was going to be any kind of relationship beyond the academic between Saffron and Alexander. But we suspect in this book that it's moving in a more romantic direction.
No spoilers, I know.
Yeah, I
But
know.
yes, Alexander is very near and dear to my heart. So I'm happy that he will be in more books. I guess I could say that.
You could say, well, the point is that she has his emotional support because he goes back to Everleigh Manor with her.
Yeah.
Another thing that was really popular or had a lot of impact in the early 20th century were spiritualists, medium, seance.
Yes.
Um, in Los Angeles, we had M.A. Semple McPherson. We had, so they appear often in late Victorian, early 20th century books. I mean, Arthur Conan Doyle, was seduced by the concept of fairies in his garden.
I could not believe when I was doing research for this book what I found out about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I was like, "Sir, you invented the most like cunning, logical detective ever in literature." And he is like obsessed with mediums and psychics and channeling ghosts. And I'm just baffled by that. I'm so baffled by that.
Well, no, there is a reason for it. He lost his son, and he never could
Hmm.
accept the fact that the boy had died. And I think all of that attempt to like cross the veil, whatever he wanted to call it, was a desperate attempt to reunite with his son. And he was
Mm.
also, fooled by or absolutely tricked by photography, which was in an early manifestation of it could often be really seductive and blurry. And somebody took
Yeah.
photographs of what they called were fairies in the bottom of the garden, and he believed those. So, it is hilarious. I mean, he was a physician, and Sherlock Holmes is like the epitome of the rational detective, as you say. So it is a real surprise
Yeah.
that Doyle. But anyway, my point is that when there is a medium introduced into the story here at Everleigh, it is not an unusual thing for the moment.
Yes, I in my research I found most of like the really like standout stories of psychics and mediums and spiritualists was in the Victorian era, but there were certainly people continuing the practice on into the 20s, especially because of the Great War. Anytime you have an influx of people grieving and losing loved ones, these people are popping up and ready to take advantage of that. Um, and the spiritualist in this story is no different. She and her assistant partner kind of guy are there in the town to drum up business for their seances, and they're doing so out of Saffron's best friend's family's house, which is just next door. So for the Elizabeth fans out there, Elizabeth has a huge role in this book because as much as Saffron is going up against the psychic, Elizabeth is at the forefront with her sword and shield ready to drive this woman out of her family's
Yep.
house.
No, Elizabeth is great in this book, and it's wonderful to see her. We also see Violet, Saffron's mother, whom we barely glimpsed, but she plays a important role in the book too. So there are several strong women combating the forces of evil. And one of the forces of evil is somebody called Bill Wyatt, who, because Lord Easing, Saffron's grandfather, may or may not be suffering from some kind of heart disease. Bill Wyatt is there, and Saffron deeply suspects that he is fraudulent in his claims to be a physician and worries about what he's up to.
Yes. In book three, we met Bill when he was trying to buy a secret in order to resell it, kind of on like the black market of government secrets. And so Saffron ruined his chances in A Botanist's Guide to Society and Secrets, and so he is making good on his threat of a debt that she owes, and has shown up at her family home, ready to get a secret from her that he can then turn a profit on. And so Saffron is searching for a secret. She finally has to come full circle on this mystery that we started all the way back in the first book of what was her father doing? What was he researching that we've gotten hints of, but this time we finally like put to rest what exactly this mystery of what Thomas Everleigh was doing. Um, and we'll see if it falls into the wrong hands or if Saffron prevails.
So well, I'm not going to ask that question. It's a spoiler. Um, do you think, that, I mean, you've had sort of one story arc powering all four books, in part Saffron's father, what happened to him. Um, do you feel like that enriches your novels to have an individual mystery, but then you have a sort of ongoing larger story arc that you need to bring to rest? And having done that, are you going to start a new one?
I am starting a new one. We do have a book five coming. I've been working on it this summer. And I'm very excited to share that Saffron is going on an expedition. Uh,
Ooh.
so we'll get to see her in an entirely new environment. I'm so excited for this next stage of her career.
Well, it's 1924,
But
so
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I
I
was
was
just
just
going to
gonna
say
say
it's
for
two
the
wars.
go ahead. Yeah, and but the interwar has it's just so rich with like things and places to go and all kinds of crazy things.
Exactly.
But in terms of the arc, I'm so happy to give readers this ending to this arc, because it's been every book we learn something new and something different about um, Thomas Everleigh, who he was, what he's doing, how it relates to Saffron now. And she's gonna make decisions about who she is and what she wants to do based off of what happens in this book. Um, and I'm excited for her to finally get closure on this issue that's been hounding her. But in terms of writing, I think it's essential. If you're writing a long-term series, you have to have something that carries over from book to book. Questions that you want answered, the relationship development, not just a romantic relationship, but we see Saffron and Elizabeth's relationship grow. Dr. Lee is also in this book briefly. We get to see how his relationship with Saffron has changed as well. So. I don't know, lots of little arcs, lots of big arcs for each book in a series.
I agree. I mean, I think that's why readers bond to series because they not only like the lead characters, but they get attached to the other characters and they are seeking answers to larger questions. I talked to so many people because a long time ago, when I first sort of got into this series were a really big thing and standalones were fairly rare among classic mystery. And now,
Mhm.
ever really since Gone Girl and the, advent of the devastating twist and the surprise and all, you can't really do that in a series. It's hard to, you can't just like devastate people's lives and have the big reveal and then they bounce up
Yeah.
all, ready to go again in the next book. And so we're seeing, I think, fewer series, although I'd like to think that there's there's always action and reaction, that we may be seeing a comeback. And I think in historical mystery, series are more prevalent. You know, people are
Hmm.
fascinated with that. But having said all that, you're right that you can't just drag on one story arc forever. At some
Yeah.
point, you want to, end that one and then start a new one. And that can be relationships like a romance. It can be a mystery in the past. It can be any number of things. So you've actually closed more than one arc in this book.
I have, and I'm so excited for what the next one is going to be because I think this particular arc I feel like is very like it's not predictable in that like I don't think that the way that it finishes is predictable, but it's very like I'm finding myself. She starts the book as a young woman. She's 23, turning 24. She's just getting her footing in her career and she's trying to figure out who she is and how she's interacting with people. So like the next the next bit of these books is going to be her learning something else. And I think that's also what people enjoy is watching the characters grow. Um, and it's weird to like go back to the first book. I finished writing book 5. So going back to the first book is so strange to see how different she was
Yeah.
in book 1 and book 2. I feel like book 3 and 4 are a little bit more similar, of course, but it's just strange to go back now.
I'm sure it is. But it's not just Saffron who is changed by all this. It's Elizabeth, as we have pointed out, or you have pointed out. And it's going to be Violet. I mean, it certainly ought to be Violet at some point because there are things Violet learns in this book that, so her life may change. And certainly we want to know what's going on with Elizabeth going forward. So, you know, I think, and even Lady, um, I'm sorry.
Lady Easting,
Yeah,
the
Lady Easting, who, is
dreadful grandmother.
but she's also a product of her era. Um, you know, um,
Yeah,
Victorian, Edwardian, whatever. The rules of society were far less flexible then. Women's roles were dramatically different. That's not at all uncommon for there to be a clash, especially in a time where the 1920s, the post-war period, was so radically different than the Edwardian period. So much got shattered and, you know, changed a whole face of British society. It really did.
yeah. And that's the reason why I chose time period. Also because aesthetically the 20s are amazing, but because the like interwar Europe is just so rich
Yeah.
on so many levels. Like, I mean, the thing that most fascinates me is on that individual level, that family level, to see how that pushes and pulls relationships and how it creates conflict, and like unlikely allies as well. But also, I 100%, it's this society and the changes in societies that are really shifting how people are talking. And I feel like, I mean, the 20s then and the 20s now, there's just something about the 20s in any century. The 20s just shake everything up, I guess. But that's another reason why I love writing about this time period is because it's so relevant now. It is very historical, but I feel like Saffron, perhaps she is a bit anachronistic, but she's so representative of what people are looking for now. They're looking for a way to contribute to make the world better, and they're looking for how to bridge gaps in values with their family and their loved ones. And they're trying to figure out how to push back on people trying to tell them what they can and can't do.
I think I agree with you. I mean, every time society can kind of come together and then inevitably forces start breaking it apart. And we're in one of those transitions at the moment. It's very unclear exactly where we're going. The war really shattered the Britain of Victoria and her son Edward. And you're also in a time when there are way fewer men than women. The whole balance of the sexes has changed because so many men were killed in the war, which meant that women had more opportunities to take jobs. They were not just going into domestic service, they were doing things that would have been unimaginable, except for the brave few before. I mean, Jackie Winsber's written about this. Rhys Bowen has
Yeah.
written about this. Lots of writers have written about it. The thing is, you really do have to stay in the interwar period, though, because, once you sort of get over to like 1934, things start to change again. But the great thing about historical fiction is you don't have to age anybody in real time. You can wind up a book and you can start a new adventure the next day or the next week or the next month, because you're already historical. So, you don't have to rush Saffron and all of her cast through the 20s. You can really enjoy them.
Yes, we will definitely be savoring the 20s. There's so much to talk about in the 20s. I think this book four is about 3 months after book three, and then book five we're actually jumping ahead like 6 months. So we're going very slow and then a big jump and then we'll probably go very slow again. So
Right.
it'll be
Well, I
fun.
mean, it's entirely up to you, whatever suits the story. But I do think that the 20s are a fascinating time. It's also a time, as you point out, where people could really travel. I mean, the war had, cut all that off, just sort of like post-COVID, where there's just a burst of travel after people were confined for so long. The war had the same effect. Um, World War II, there was a lot more travel involved. I mean, the theater was so huge. It was like the whole world. Um, Men, travel a lot, but women did a lot more jobs in World War II than they did in World War One, and, served in a lot of different ways. And so there was considerably more travel, not to mention the ways to do it because the airplane had kind of come along by then.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can see that she could go post-war too, but why do that right at the moment? Got it.
Yeah.
Right. So when you go about your research, what poisons are you attracted to? Do you write this or envision the story and think about what the best, poisons would be to fit it, or do you get hooked on a poison and then draft a crime that you think, well, the poison is plausible?
I taught a course at a writing conference a couple of months ago where we talked about this. How do you do it? If you want to use a poison, how do you do it? But my approach is definitely find a poison that fits the story, as opposed to write a story around a poison. Just because I already have ideas about what the characters need to do in every book. But I have definitely found, as I've been researching, poisons that are really cool. And I'm like, I need to find a way to use this. And I had someone a couple of months ago tell me, hey, I heard about this poison, you should use it. And I was like, this is actually super fascinating. So I think I am gonna find a way to write around that. I can't give any spoilers because I don't want to give away what it is, but um yeah, I mean, at this point I have learned about so many, but I mean by far my favorite are the botanical ones, the ones that you can just pick out of a garden and go. But yeah, I mean these days very different. I mean, it's you can still pick stuff out of a garden, but why would you when there's so many very elaborate ones that you can give just a teeny tiny amount of and it serves their purpose. But that's why I'm glad I write historical because they don't have the same level of science and technology that we do now. So it's a little bit more interesting. I like the organic stuff because I like plants. Um, but I will say it makes me really obnoxious to walk through a garden with. We have my neighbors have a big planting of oleander, and so every year when it comes up out of the ground, I'm walking down the street with my son and our little neighbor friends, and I say, "That's poisonous. Look at this. This is poisonous. Don't eat that. That over there, lantana, that has berries, that's poisonous." And I just go off, and they're like, "Okay, like I get it." Um, but I'm like, this is helpful knowledge, you guys, and it's cool. Like, who doesn't want to know about poisons when you're like, a kid? Maybe that shows that I was always meant to be writing about poisons because I did think it was interesting as a kid.
No, I don't. I mean, actually, I live in a place where oleander is a normal hedge plant.
Hmm.
I mean, Phoenix has entire vistas of oleander. So, and we have other, if not poisonous, actually, ferocious plants that can really hurt you.
Yeah, who needs poisons when y'all have cacti? They're
Yeah. Well,
dangerous and big.
we
I
have
guess
a,
not that
yep, we
dangerous.
have a giant saguaro at this end of the house, and they weigh such an extraordinary amount. When the heat last summer, but particularly the summer before last, people had not thought about watering saguaro because you just wouldn't think about it. But when it was 119 for like 30 days or something, the saguaro sometimes just died, or sometimes they dropped one of their major arms to try to conserve
Mhm.
water and so forth. And ours did drop one, but fortunately it went streetwise. But we now have it braced because if it falls on the house, it would really be disastrous because they are so incredibly heavy. They're not only big, but all the water inside makes
Mhm.
them. But there are many, many unfriendly plants here. But it seemed to me the reason I brought that up in part was that you have to have credible access to poison if you're going to be using it. I mean, you can't have something that is, distantly imported from some island of the Pacific or something unless you have some way for that
Exactly.
poison to get to the place that you need it to be. So, I mean, I do think a garden is extremely useful and that you can grow your own, datura out there or make oleander tea or whatever you want to do. If you're going to use a more exotic poison, you have to come up with a way that somebody has access to it.
Yes. And that's part of the reason why the university is a great setting for, mysterious poisons. That's what the first book is about. This half of the suspects have access to either a greenhouse that contains dangerous plants or in their travels they could have picked something up. So I absolutely agree. This is the number one thing that I was talking about in the poisons class I gave, which is if you're going to use a poison, the most important thing is the person has to have reasonable access to it and reasonable knowledge of it. Otherwise, everyone in the audience is going to go, "Huh?" And they're not. It's not going to be believable that nobody would be like, "Oh, this mysterious." Uh, toxin that the native people of Nicaragua only use this one plant that lives there, and then like somebody in Australia is using it. Well, how did it get there? Um, so again, very useful to have a university setting with people coming and going all the time and lots of knowledge and a great big library that can tell them many things.
Well, that's absolutely true. It's also important that your poisoner actually knows how the poison works. I don't know if you're familiar with Dorothy Sayers and the documents of the case. Has anybody ever talked to you about that? I think
I
we've
have
lost.
one.
Um,
There we go.
are you back?
I've heard of that one, but I love Dorothy Sayers. Lord Peter is the best.
Well, the documents in the case is not a Lord Peter Wimsey, but the poison of choice in the documents in the case is the fatal mushroom. And unfortunately, Sayers didn't know how it worked. And so the entire poison thing in the book is defective. And, it was embarrassing for her, I think, but sort of funny. But it does illustrate the idea that a poisoner really ought to know how the poison will work when deployed.
Yes. Well, and that's what's so wonderful about Agatha Christie, right? Is that she was a pharmacy techs person like during the war and then I think maybe after the war as well. So she knew poisons really well. But I can't imagine what research must have been like when Dorothy like how limited it is compared to what is available now. Like I don't have to leave my house to learn everything down to like the chemical composition of aconite. So I can't imagine that she had an easy time finding any of that information anyway.
No, I mean, it's just kind of an amusing footnote. People often compare Sayers and Christie in the same way that mystery fans will compare Chandler and Hammett.
Mhm.
And, the one Chandler and Sayers are generally thought to be more character driven than science driven or whatever, whereas Hammett, who was an actual Pinkerton agent, or Christie, who, as you point out, worked in a pharmacy and all, had a more rigorous background. And so their books tend to reflect that. The other author who also worked as in a pharmacy during the war was Ellis Peters, Edith Pargeter, her name. And the Brother Cadfael mysteries, as a result, have a lot of botanicals. Of course, we're also talking about was it 12th century, when, more or less the only medicine and sanitation things and so forth they had was some combination of botanicals. But she was very accurate too in her books because of her own service in a chemist, as the British call it, during the war.
Yeah. Love
So,
that. Love that for language.
right. Well, I think
Sorry,
at
I
this
keep worrying
point,
that we're freezing.
sorry.
I keep worrying that we're freezing. It's
Well,
kind of a
you are. I mean,
little trauma around
yeah,
freezing at the about right time.
there's a real time lag, and so you kind of come and go, but we can mostly hear your voice. But anyway, I'm delighted to hear there's going to be a book five. And you actually had someone else returning from an expedition, and I'm trying to remember if it was book one or book two, but so you'd already established the idea that Saffron's department did go off and explore things.
Yes, we've heard some murmur expedition throughout these four books. So I'm very excited that Saffron gets to get time. Because I got a number of messages after book one came out asking if Saffron was going on this Amazonian expedition that they've been talking about. And I had to say, no, sorry, she's going to be here. So now I get to say, yes, she goes off. They will be going to an excavation in Turkey. Um, in what is now called Izmir and was then called Smyrna. And they're going to go dig some stuff up. I'm so excited to see how people like this story. I mean, it might be like the craziest one yet. We've had some pretty crazy stuff happen throughout these books, but this one is going to be one of the best ones yet.
Well, I'm really looking forward to it since I've actually been there. I've spent quite a lot of time in Turkey. Oh, I think we lost her. Patrick, are you there? Right. She may try to, there she comes back again. Maybe her reconnect will be
Off.
better.
It
There
just
you
kicked me
are.
all the way.
We lost you, so you're going to need to repeat whatever it was you just said, Kate. You
I
disappeared.
was just saying that the thing just kicked me all the way off and then brought me all the way back. So hopefully it'll stay.
Well, I hope so too. We're going to go to questions. I was saying before you left that I've actually spent time in Izmir and quite a lot of time in Turkey, which is one of my favorite places. So I'm particularly excited that you've written about it.
Yes, I've been there once. I went to Istanbul and Edirne for just a couple days, and it was like it's one of my favorite places I've ever been. So I was very happy to return to it, even if it was just through Google Maps.
Right. I totally agree. Patrick, do you want to check in with the audience and see if there
Yeah.
are any
Yeah,
questions or comments?
there's a question about, and I'm curious about this too. What kind of interesting, like botanical curiosities do you collect?
Oh, collect myself. I have two small children, and my own personal living room jungle has just dwindled over the years, because I either have a curious toddler who wants to dig the dirt up, or I have mom brain and I forget to water them. So right now, my options are pretty limited. I have a very happy collection of Hoyas, but those are like the most interesting things that I have right now. But I can't wait when when I have more brain space and less kitty fingers in the dirt. I'm very excited to like open up my plants once again. But now, like I said, now I'm like really worried about like what things are poisonous and not. So I don't know what plants are going to end up coming home with me in the future.
Good
Well,
point.
and certain plants are poisonous to animals too.
This is
Yep, they
true.
sure are.
Yeah. Um, let's see here. Okay. Here's a question. I know Mrs. Khavari is a fan of Sherlock Holmes and Poirot. Can you tell us a quality of each of these characters that you appreciate the most?
Hmm. I love everything about Poirot. I love that he's fussy. I love that he is so detail oriented. I love his like little mustache. I love his companionship with Hastings. And their weird like I mean they're friends, but like Poirot's always like, you're an idiot. So I love their weird dynamic. I don't know. There's so much to love. For Holmes, for me, like the thing that I love the most about him is that he has a great deal of compassion. He shows it in a weird way. Even like it just on paper, like he can be very harsh with his clients, and not like super caring of their feelings. But like when it comes down to it, like why would he use his amazing brain for what he does if he didn't care about people, if he didn't want to help people? So I don't know. Sherlock Holmes is kind of a weird dude, but I love that he puts all this like amazing, incredible brain with such focus. I love that.
Let's see. Okay, here's one for you. Kate, do you believe in ghosts?
Okay. Yes and no. Mostly no. From like a realistic science perspective, no. I don't think that there's like little ghosts floating around. But I do believe that those who have passed on can like, I don't know, come back certainly in dreams. I do think that. I haven't personally experienced it, but I've had a lot of close people in my life tell me that they've dreamed of people who have passed on, and so I believe that. Um, but I mean, like ghosts like pushing over a lamp because they're angry. No, I don't believe in that.
Um, okay, Allie is a huge fan from New Mexico,
Thank
and
you.
she says, I'm curious to know if you have the character arcs carved in stone from book one to now in book four and five, or have you reimagined the storylines or discovered them along the way? Did you have a plan? I think is what she's asking.
So I wrote the first drafts of the first 4.5 books in one summer. The like 2018. Um, I started writing and it was like busting open a fire hydrant. All these ideas just came out all at once. So I've written the first 4.5. Halfway through book five, I stopped because I was teaching at the time in the series again, so I stopped writing. And so as these books have been published and I've reworked them in order to, be up to par for publishing, the character arcs haven't changed. They have certainly gotten nuances, um, especially as we've gone on and the characters have grown more. The nuances of how they interact with each other has changed. For Elizabeth and and these later books have you start to see their friendship grow because like they're around each other. Saffron lives with Elizabeth and she's dating Alexander, and so they're around each other, and so their relationship starts to develop. And that wasn't in the original drafts, but as we're going, I'm like, well, it would make sense that they would start to. They almost have like a brother sister thing going. They snipe at each other a lot in this book four. It's very funny. Um, but I'm kind of excited now that I've moved past these original drafts to see what happens, and to really draft from scratch for the first time, and see what new things come out of my brain. Because it's been a long time since I've thought of these characters without the structure that I built years ago.
Very interesting. Um, Let me look over here at YouTube. Okay, here's one that says rituals and revenge is such a compelling pairing. Did you discover any real historical practices or societal norms during your research that helped shape the mystery or inspire the title?
Hmm. I cannot take any credit for the title. That was my very lovely marketing team at Crooked Lane. Every time I send in a draft, they say, "Okay, now what are some ideas for titles?" And the things that I come up with are never good, you guys. I wish that I could come up with something so snappy, but I apparently need like 100,000 words to get something good. So
Mhm.
that's not me. That's them. But in terms of like, I mean, we've talked a little bit, me and Barbara just now about the context of the psychic and what in history and in even in the 1920s, what spiritualism was and what it was about. So there's kind of that context. But Bill's part of the story, he is this kind of anarchist kind of guy who's literally going around stealing secrets to sell to and from governments and other players. And I think I mean, that reflects the chaos and the uncertainty of interwar Europe. The war ends and people really want that stability back, but the truth is that that is just not what was going on. You have power grabs and power plays going on, and people trying to make sure it doesn't happen again, fortifying themselves in their countries to make sure it doesn't happen again. So, Bill's part of the story, the kind of like espionage part, um, does come from a historical context of trying to build up against something like this happening again. Something like this being the Great War, sorry.
Right. Let's see here. Got some good questions tonight. Um, okay, here's Renee would like to know when is your favorite time to write? You probably have to do it around kids schedules now, right?
Yes, my only consistent time to write is my daughter's nap time, and thank God she is a very good napper, so I have 2 hours a day. Um, and recently it has been 0 hours a day, and it's been very hard because I want to be here writing, but I have other things that I have to do. My son is on summer break, and trying to convince him to leave me alone to write at all is a lesson in what is it? A lesson in does he
Futility.
Futility.
futility. Thank you.
Let's see. Um, okay, yeah. Randy would like to know. He says, how can we find you to ask questions, offer comments once we get into the series? I'm a new to you reader. I got a notification about this event, joined it, and now we'll get into your series, but it will be months before I read several of them. Are you accessible to your readers?
Well, first, welcome, Randy. Sorry you got into such a weird and wacky conversation, but I hope that you enjoy the books once you get into them. I am honestly trying to be online a little bit less, but I am very accessible through my website. You can join my newsletter, and I send it out. I mean, it's every month, but there are definitely months where I don't send it out because I just don't have anything going on. And then I am pretty active on Instagram, Facebook and Threads, not so much. I'm not on Twitter, X, whatever at all anymore. So if you want to get in touch, feel free to find me through um, my website, which is khavari.com, or my Instagram, which is author Khavari. And that's where I'm at.
Excellent. You know what? I think that's about it.
Alrighty,
Uh,
well, I do think, by the way, that the covers for the books are really very evocative of the story
Thanks.
within. I love the color of this one. As I said, I kind of tried to dress to match here, but I think They almost remind me in some ways of, the flower paintings. They're not as elaborate as Flemish flower paintings, but kind of along those lines. So I think Crooked Lane, your publisher, has done a really nice job with the packaging of them. So our signed copies, Kate has sent them to us, so they should be arriving any moment. And it's a lovely book to read. If you have a long 4th of July weekend coming up, you could actually binge the entire series, which would be a great idea
Yes,
because the
and I
first
would
read.
love to plug, I'd love to plug also the audiobook. Um, Harris is Jodie Foster. Jodie Harris is my audiobook narrator, and she is incredible. I get more love for the book covers and the audiobook than anything else. So if you're an audiobook lover, I highly recommend them. And I believe that you can get the audiobook through the Poison Pen. Y'all will have
We
to
can.
confirm that for me, but you should be able to get it.
We are partners with a company called Libro.fm, and this June is actually audiobook month, which is I haven't gotten around to highlighting. But yes, you can. We have a store within Libro.fm, and they remit a small percentage of the sales price to the bookstore. So, it's nice to be able to do that. My husband is a huge audiobook fan, and he is listening currently to this book because he asked me if I had read it, and he's really enjoying it. He was not sure he's not what I would call an historical fiction reader, but apparently he's completely hooked. So, yay.
That's
Right. That
wonderful.
surprised you too.
Yeah, it really
Patrick?
did. That did
No,
surprise me.
Patrick would be surprised. You wouldn't imagine that this was Rob's book, but he's really enjoying it. So,
He's a Renaissance man.
yeah, yes, in many respects. Anyway, it's really a pleasure to talk to you, Kate. Thank you all for joining us, those of you who are watching this, and thank you, Kate, for spending time with us. My goal is to lure her to see us one of these days, so I hope that
Okay,
we can do that.
this year the tour is small, but these next couple years I am going big. We are coming. I want to come see you guys. And thank you guys so much for continuing to invite me to come and share with you guys and your readers. And I just want to say again, thank you for having such an incredible bookstore, a place for the reading community and the community at large. And for all the people listening, thank you for joining us and continue to support the Poison Pen because they're awesome.
Thank you very much, Kate. That's kind of you to say so. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Thanks for having me.